And remember, we're going to remove that one agenda item.
Right. Okay, I have 5:15, and let's call the Planning and Budget meeting for April 6th to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Anderson,
Present.
Delgado,
Present.
Wong.
Present.
I have all members present. Delgado is virtual. Anderson and Wong are in the boardroom.
Okay, let's see. Before the approval of the agenda, we'd like to remove one item, and that's the easement, item 3A, which is the easement for Shore Drive, city request. That is not necessary for.
There's some language that we want to get cleaned up before we brought it before, so we want to remove it.
All right, so we'll remove 3A from the agenda. That being said, can we have an approval of the agenda with a revision?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 1D, which is the approval of the minutes from last month's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have an approval of the minutes along with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Move on to item 2A, which is the 2021 summer school presentation. And for that, we will have Ms. Mortek, I believe, is going to be leading this presentation along with Ms. Elliott, Ms. Virgo, Ms. Hendricks-Nora, and Mr. Strauss. So go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I would like to thank all of the staff that are on the call here because this has definitely been a group effort in planning and coming together and collaborating. So thank you, everyone that has jumped in tonight to be here to help answer questions, which we'll take at the end if that's okay with you all. So I am going to ask Dan, could you go in present mode for me? I'd appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again. I appreciate it. It's easier for me. Okay. So summer school and summer learning 2021. Those three buckets underneath are what we want to hold on to because it helps to really frame and shape our programming and why we're doing what we're doing. So those three things are support enrichment, credit recovery, and what we're calling opportunity bridges. Okay. So again, here are three buckets in thinking about our children and our young people and their needs and our goals for them this summer. So as we were talking and reflecting on previous years and where we were, where we are, and where we want to go, these goals emerged. We wanted to be able to provide quality programming that offers opportunities for prioritized standards-aligned learning, along with fun and wellness and enrichment. And the second goal was to provide opportunities for face-to-face hands-on learning, right? Giving our kids an opportunity to unplug. That includes student choice and those high-interest activities, along with flexibility for families and scheduling. And then our last goal was really to apply that equitable lens and think about what are some of those opportunity bridges that we could offer students in recognizing COVID and pandemic and what we've been through this year to intentionally address proficiency in credit recovery and literacy in math. And there are some highlights that I wanted to talk about or speak to up front because they align with those goals and those buckets. And so some of our highlights is we wanted to offer summer school at 6 sites. So we'll be at 3 elementaries, 2 intermediate, and our high school this year. Those sites were chosen to also allow for therapeutic options for some of our students. And then when we think about that standards aligned, we have an A path, and then we also have we path opportunities, wellness and enrichment. And so we wanted a blended experience and again, choice for students and families to be in those paths. And then finally, we thought about those opportunity bridges. And so these will be specific for students that are identified. So we wanted a opportunity bridge that explicitly targets foundational skills in grades 1 to 2 to help students be poised for the fall. Again, reading fluency for grades 4 to 5, really important to have at-level repeated reading in sort of a routine with 4th and 5th graders reading at their grade level to, again, prepare them for fall. Standards-based algebra and English, 9, looking at that in a different way in the way in which we're offering it. Asynchronous credit recovery, so that's an opportunity to think about how we can be within the guidelines of DPI and offerings, but still think outside of the box in the way in which we can meet the needs of our students. And then, of course, a summer graduation ceremony, right? Giving students the opportunity to graduate as 2021. So the way that this is organized is to think about elementary and intermediate, and then we'll target the high school. So the elementary and intermediates will be face-to-face for 6 weeks in whole, Monday through Friday. We wanted flexibility for families, so we have 3 sessions. Families can sign up for 1 of the sessions, 2 of the sessions, or all 3 of the sessions. And again, the whole window is 6 weeks, but these are these 2-week sessions that allow families the flexibility to choose. And then for our elementary times, they can choose an A path, which is in the morning. Those are those standards aligned options. And then a we path, wellness and enrichment, in that, I want to say afternoon, but it really isn't afternoon, it's mid-morning to noon. Both of those paths will offer a breakfast or a lunch. And then for our intermediate, similar in having the A path and we path opportunities, but this is going to look a little more how an intermediate schedule looks on the day-to-day, which is a blend, right? So I might in the morning go from a literacy, then I might want to play basketball, and then later on I'm going to have math, and then I'm going to go to chess. So again, that blended A path and we path opportunities, it just isn't separated out by a morning session and a mid-morning session. And then just some other additional logistical information for elementary and intermediate registration. We will be doing through Skyward this year in doing our research with other districts that have Skyward as their informational database. You can do registration for summer school through Skyward, which actually makes our back work a lot easier. So we'll be working on that to get that all ready to go. Families will be able to choose their session dates, and then the scheduling and course paths will follow after the registration, the upfront registration occurs. Again, morning sessions with breakfast, mid-morning sessions offerings with lunch. We will have condensed transportation provided, just like we've done in regular years with those corner stops during the start and the end times. Unfortunately, we don't have transportation during midday, so if a family needs transportation, their child would have to do both that whole session day. which is a half day still, but the whole time. And then we will have those extended coordinated childcare opportunities through our community partners. We know a lot of our community partners in Beloit are offering services, so we'll continue to work with them if families need childcare in the afternoon. Okay, so for high school, this is an 8-week window of time. And the reason why is because we will have some courses that run 4 weeks and some courses that run the full 8 weeks. That 4-week mini session allows students for credit recovery to get in their minutes so that they're able to get additional credits. And so that was something that was learned and informed our decisions that we had done in the past moving forward. And then we will be able to offer in-person and hybrid asynchronous learning. That's important to understand because we want to think about sometimes a high schooler's life. And so again, we have to remain within the guidelines of DPI, but there is opportunity here for us to think about an asynchronous experience where the student might be completing their work or their coursework right after in the evenings or when sometimes teenagers do things, but then they'll have an opportunity to have direct instruction online, and that's the asynchronous piece. They have to have direct instruction in order for us to reimburse those minutes. And so that was another part that we really wanted to think through, and we have some work to do on that, but that offering is there. And then lastly, we're thinking about opportunity bridges, which is intentional, allowing students to demonstrate proficiency standards and looking at what they've already demonstrated and where the gaps are, and then teaching to those gaps. So again, and those are our 2 opportunity bridges for high school. For health and safety, we will be continuing to follow a lot of the protocols that we have set in place for term 4. That was the approved plan. And then also knowing right in these times that we have learned science self-corrects itself. And so what is true today might not be true in June. And we also have a great opportunity in term 4 to really learn about in-person instruction. And so yes, keeping true to some of those hand washing, masks, physical distancing pieces that have already been approved for term 4, but modifying and adapting to be in alignment with the most current CDC and Rock County guidelines. Enrollment caps will be determined by staffing and building capacity. So we really want to think about safety first, right? How the capacity of the buildings, and then also what is the number of staff that we have available for summer school. Right now, I will tell you there is an interest in it, and it is looking good. So I'm feeling excited about that. And then our last piece is just that expectations in staff and student handbooks apply to summer programming. And lastly, our materials and resources. We'll be using this year some braided funds. We have a summer school budget and then also some federal funding. We want to do something special this year and invest in what's called a Lit Camp, and that's through Scholastic. And these are materials that we can use thereafter. And they're really about promoting a joy for reading, and there are embedded cell practices within this Lit Camp. It's research-based, and so that will be a great opportunity for our K-5 students when they pick the A path and participate in literacy. In addition, we'll just have some of the things that we've had last year and in the past, manipulatism supplies for STEAM, our reading fluency packets that we'll be producing for our 4th and 5th graders, and then our chapter books and credit recovery. I did want to stress, too, that we will have DLI as an option. So when we're purchasing these materials, they will also be in English and in Spanish. I didn't put that in the presentation anywhere, but it is available, and we are planning to offer that as well for the students that are in DLI. And I think that leads us to a thank you. So we are open for questions. And again, I do have staff here that can help me with some of the nuances if needed.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Questions from staff members, and we'll start out with Mr. Anderson.
I just want to say, or start off by saying thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure everyone is really excited for summer school in a way. But my main question I had was, I know every once in a while Skyward can be a little difficult to get around, and is there going to be kind of like some directions, like so that we can put on the school district website saying, hey, like follow these steps and you can get to how to register your kid to summer school or anything like that? How is that looking?
Yeah, so Chair Member Anderson, I'm so glad that you asked that question. Yes, and we've been looking at other school districts that have been using Skyward to see how they do that. And we are producing a guidebook, a summer school guidebook for parents. And then we also have our website started. If you go to the district portal and go on 2021 summer school, you'll begin to see some of that information. And on there will be directions about how to go into Skyward, and they go through their family access. And so we'll be uploading that and populating it along with the PDF so that people can look in the guidebook as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, and just as a side note, if they have their if they have the family login, they'll be able to access it. So, and they can get that information from their school sites if they don't have it. And then we'll have also our central enrollment staff on call to help support families if they need it. And then when summer school starts, then the site-based staff will be there to support and register people as well.
You good on that? Okay. Board Member Delgado.
Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are enjoying the great weather. It's awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. Looks like a lot of work went into it. And just a little follow-up on Board Member Anderson's question. So besides Skyward, is there any other options for families to get their kids registered for summer school?
We will have a number available from the Central Enrollment Office. I'm struggling with those words tonight. I don't know why. We'll have that district number available too on our website. Of course, we want to encourage people to register their students, on their own, but of course we'll be there available to support that, and we'll have both the number and the address for them to contact.
Thank you. So I'm just a little concerned, if the only option is online. So what you're saying right now is that there's going to be a phone number for families to call, and they will be assisted. So that means that someone will be registering them on the phone. So for those that don't have like any electronic systems available to them, they can just call.
That is correct. Thank you for that clarification, Board Member Delgado. Yes, they'll be able to call, and then also we're able to, through Skyward, just transfer information. So that registration type things, right, like who your emergency contacts are, where your address is, will just transfer over. And it's also an opportunity for us as a district to update any of those addresses if people happen to move in the meantime. But all of that will be there, and then someone will be there to help support them.
Awesome. Okay, my next question. I really like the idea of the high school students being able to do some credit recovery. I know that, with all this year, being virtual and COVID hitting, having to get used to a different way of learning has really threw off a lot of students. So that's, it's great that they're able to do some credit recovery. Do we have any idea of what are our expected numbers for high schoolers? And are we prepared to have those individuals in sight in school? just thinking about that, COVID's not totally gone, and we're so do we have any, predictions as to how many students we're going to be getting for high school that are going to be doing credit recovery?
Yeah, so I can tell you that we talked a little bit about that, and I'll call on Jeff in just a minute to speak to some of that because he's definitely more in touch with those types of numbers. We want to be able to give kids as much as they need in the sense of extra time so that we have more kids graduating. And so ultimately that goal with the summer graduation is to allow students that opportunity. We also have staff that are interested in doing this work, and so that's exciting. Jeff, do you want to speak a little bit to what you think some of those projected numbers are?
Sure. I did summer school last year, which was also shortly after the pandemic had begun, and some students had already struggled in term 4. So based on that and the numbers of students that I know need to recover credits from this school year too, I would expect them to be probably around the same, at least initially, which I think was around 500 or so. And then as the summer went on, I think about 150 of those dropped from doing it. So probably somewhere between 350 and 500.
And we do have staff that are going to be available to attend to the needs of those students. And we're going to be following protocols as far as precautions, COVID, and all of that. And we should be okay. Is that correct to say?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. So you stated that, so for those that are doing credit recovery, and mostly thinking about the seniors so they can graduate, so we are going to be offering a summer graduation. So that would be separate from the actual graduation that is going to take place in June. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then just something that I'm a little confused about the times. So you mentioned different times, and maybe it's just a little confusion as to the sessions because there's 2 different sessions, like A path and the We path for elementary. So students will come into class at 7:45. And their end time is 12:15, but it's 2 different, paths or classes. Is that, how exactly does that work?
Thank you, Board Member Delgado. So we wanted to offer flexibility to families and to kids. And so what we are saying is that a family might say, hey, I want my child to come from 7:45 to 9:45, and then I'm going to come pick them up. So during that time, they'll be engaged in the A path, which is the standards aligned, more content core academic piece. Or a family might say, you know what, we're good there. We want to offer wellness and enrichment. So I'm just going to bring my child from 9:45 to 12:15 each day, and they'll engage in that. Or someone like myself, who's a working parent, would need more than that, right? And I would probably need transportation. And so in that case, my child would come all day from 7:45 to 12:15, and then I would have an arrangement to go to a community partnership after that. And so that's the concept there, is we wanted to be flexible in times for families, but also what their children are engaged in. We might have a child that doesn't necessarily want to do extra support in math and literacy, but wants to come and do basketball or wants to do chess or, have different opportunities with just peers, because it's been a minute, right, since we've just engaged in that way. And so I hope that helps to explain it. Within that flexibility is also the sessions. So there's the dates, right? So for 2 weeks, This is when we're coming, and we're going to do just the APAP. Or we're coming this 2 weeks, and we're going to do both the APAP and the WEPAP. That's for the elementary. That's what that looks like. For the intermediate times, it's just blocks of time. So same concepts, just you could come from 8:30 to 10:30, or you could come from 10:30 to 1, or you could do both, and you would have a blend of APAP and WEPAP in both of those parts.
So we're providing is just different options to accommodate parents, which I really think is great. It's awesome. Okay, so that's pretty much clear. Is this is different from what you did last year, right? From previous years. This is new.
Thank you. I think some of it is new and some of it's what's tried and true and works. And so in my understanding, because I'm fairly new, there was some feedback last spring about really wanting to have some standards aligned content options available. And so we wanted to make sure that we did that, especially in this climate of having some unfinished teaching that has happened. And then also just really being responsive to what kids have enjoyed in the past as well. When we talked to Michelle, our intermediate principal that's done summer school, and she could definitely speak to this, you know, getting kids to come in and be engaged in school and doing fun things like basketball or chess is also an important thing to provide. And so I think it's new in the sense of the way in which it's structured, but we've also learned from the past and brought with it some of those things that have worked. Michelle, do you want to speak a little bit to some of that as well?
Yes, good evening. So we found like a lot of times the kiddos want to come in for maybe we call them periods, like period 1 and 2, because like, Ms. Nora, I did well in English and I don't want to take that. Can I just come in for chess or for math because I like that? So it was just piecemealing here and there where we want them to come in, yes, because we want them to be there, but this way it's more structured rather than them just coming in at different times throughout the day. We can structure it this way so they can come in, whether it's portion of the morning or the afternoon, and then with the different sessions that people felt like it was an all or nothing for the summer, like maybe I'm going out of town for a week or 2 weeks, so then I just won't come. It's like, no, well, maybe you can do session 1 for these dates, but maybe you're going out of town for these dates and you can't. So we found that often they'll leave and come back. We have to unenroll them and then re-enroll them again and then unenroll them again for when they were gone. So then giving them options, sort of like a camp. I'm coming for these weeks or this time throughout the day in order to give them more options for them to participate, because that's what we found in our age group is what the parents and the students kind of wanted.
I definitely love that creativity. I support it 100%. It's awesome. Me as a parent speaking. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is I really love the opportunity bridges and allowing students to demonstrate proficiency. I think that sometimes when you cram, because 8 weeks and trying to do that credit recovery, I mean, if you think about, you know, an actual semester, an actual class, putting it all together in 8 weeks, demonstrating proficiency is probably more viable than having like everything that you normally cover within the year. And, you know, with all the homeworks and everything, I really like that portion of it where they demonstrate that proficiency. And then DLI materials, another thumbs up for that. Just love it. It's something that it's highly needed. So thank you for that. And that's all I got. I'm sorry I spoke too much and asked too many questions.
Well, I don't think I have any questions. No, I do have questions. Actually, I have 2. One is, we know that this year has been extremely difficult for a lot of students. Some have thrived in this environment, and others have really struggled. Are there going to be opportunities for, I know you have, credit recovery, but let's say a student comes in and they're going through the work, but it's becoming obvious that maybe they need more help. Is there tutoring opportunities for students to engage in? And if there is that going to be additional staff members? Is there opportunities for community members to be involved, or are we going to exclude them, keep them out of the buildings to try to reduce the number of contacts? or even possibly having other students come in and help out as well?
Thank you, Board Member Wong. We have not talked about tutoring. What we talked about was the opportunity bridges. So, for example, if we're seeing that a student is wrestling with that online material when they come in, we can easily say, hey, you know what, you're here. Why don't you participate in one of these opportunity bridges, like in first and second grade early reading acquisition, or fourth and fifth grade fluency? That's possible because that'll be built into like that morning session or the scheduling. So that's the way that I think that we thought about that. It is something that we could look into. Again, we didn't talk a lot about tutoring. Currently, we are limiting people coming into the building just because of COVID and screeners. So for safety reasons, that is currently limited. So we would have to do some research into, you know, what we want to do and where we want to go with that piece.
I guess my question, along with that goes, you know, here you're trying to cram a lot of information in a very short period of time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And if you have students that are clearly behind and we're trying to catch them up and make them proficient, you know, I guess my concern becomes, and I know this from, my wife has been doing a fair amount of tutoring this over the last several months at some of the facilities, the library and the Boys and Girls Club. And I think the challenges that have been faced with that and the concern of, you know, these kids have really fallen way behind. And are we going to be able to catch them up fast enough? Or are they going to be, and I guess the question along with that, how are we going to assess to where they're going to be? Or is that something that's going to be done in the fall before they head in the next year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will have some of our screener information from this spring, but then also we will have some of that fall data so that we know where our kids are at. I think it's important that we focus on scaffolding in the fall, which is another conversation versus this kind of concept of learning loss. But again, with tutoring, that is something that we can definitely look into to have, you know, separate services. We were just within the confines of what we can be reimbursed for with summer school and minutes and the staffing. And that's the parameters that we've been operating in.
Perhaps there might be some opportunities with, I mean, I know that there's a large number of volunteers in the community that have been more than happy to help out at various times with tutoring or with volunteering. And I know that if we want to restrict them in the building, I can certainly understand that. But perhaps if there's students that are saying, yes, I need to catch up here, and maybe it's almost like perhaps a big brother, big sister type initiative that is structured, whereby maybe we have a greater opportunity to catch these kids up faster. Just a thought. Second question is, with COVID not completely in our rearview mirror at this point, we had heard the news yesterday about the daycare center up in Madison, and we know that there's variants that continue to rise up throughout the country, and there's a lot of a lot of still concerns about how people are addressing COVID. What's the contingency plan if there's an outbreak? What's going to happen with these students, especially when you start to talk about high school students that are trying to recover or where they want to graduate, and now suddenly school is shut down?
Dr. Keyser, did you want to speak a little bit to that?
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we still are following all of our normal health and safety procedures. So we are still doing screeners. We are still doing our checks. So if a student were to be screened out, we would be contacting families and we would be doing our normal contact tracing. If the county were to declare a localized outbreak and we would have to shut down, we would at this point, in building the plan for summer school, I know Ms. Martek had been working with DPI, and they were allowed to give districts a waiver to do distance learning and be reimbursed. they're going through that process right now and won't have a definitive answer until late May. So at this point, all school districts in the state of Wisconsin are building their plans based on an in-person model. So we would have to shut our summer school down, and the asynchronous pieces would still be able to move, but by and large, our in-person summer school structure would be put on hold during that time of a localized outbreak. So in the cases of elementary, if it occurred right in the middle or right at the beginning of a session, that entire session would be over by the time we would be able to bring everyone back. That being said, if DPI does allow us for a waiver, we would be able to then come back around with the summer school planning team and look at some options for being able to do a transition into some sort of distance learning model. But at this point, our focus has been on what the state is allowing us to plan for it moving forward.
Okay. I hope it doesn't happen. I mean, but I also don't want to go into this completely blind with the idea that, oh, it's not going to happen. And then suddenly I know that, some of the sports, specifically, I know volleyball got shut down because of an outbreak. We know it can happen. And if it does, then, we need to have the contingency plan in place to be able to address those issues. And I'm thinking of, if I'm a senior and I need 1 credit or I need 2 credits or whatever it is in order to graduate, and now suddenly I'm in the middle of summer and school is shut down, what's going to happen? Do I, in that situation?
And in part, kind of from that point of view, the high school model is slightly different, that there is some flexibility with providing asynchronous learning. So there is a little bit of flexibility in the approach that we're taking for credit recovery that would still allow that to continue. Although the face-to-face piece would be disrupted, we would still be able to provide some level of credit recovery for our high school students in that sort of situation.
Okay. Are there any other board members that are on the call today that have any questions? I believe there's one other board member that was on. President, she dropped off. Okay. And this was just for information only. So we appreciate the work that's been put into this. I know that this is a very hot topic as far as trying to get the kids back in school, but also addressing the needs of the students, specifically those that have need some additional help for to help perhaps catch up. But are there any other questions from other board members? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work on that.
Thank you, and thank you to the members from the staff that are here tonight. I appreciate it.
And I guess I do have one other question, Dr. Kieser. Is this going to be brought up to the full board yet in a future meeting here, or is it just for our committee?
We brought it to the committee. We certainly can present an update later on once we get some more guidance and we follow up on some of the questions that were asked today.
Okay. I don't want to burn board time. I think that would be a discussion for board member or for President Miller to see if it's something that maybe want to be addressed, or maybe it's a shortened version of this.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, the next topic is 2B, and this is the K through 5 literacy materials adoption. And once again, we have Ms. Mortek presenting along with Mr. Bosco, Ms. Larson, and I think that's it. So take it away again.
All right, great. Thank you for this exciting opportunity to be here. We are ready to give you a robust presentation because it's framing within the context of just overall improvement for literacy outcomes for our kids in the school district of Beloit. So I want to kick it off in that way so that we're holding onto that as we're thinking through this presentation. And again, thank you, Rosa Maria and Tony, for your hard work that you've been doing to prepare for this day. It's been a lot, so thank you. K-5 literacy pilot and high quality materials adoption recommendation. We're ready. So we wanted to start out with just really thinking about the goals we have. And our goals and our mission is to improve those literacy outcomes for our kids and to think about how we can close opportunity gaps. And in order to do that, we took some steps back to think about, well, what is our collective vision for literacy in the school district of Beloit? And so if we want to improve literacy, we have to have this collective vision and mission, right, with all stakeholders to just really improve literacy. And when we talk about literacy, we mean it's not just reading, we mean reading, writing, language, speaking, and listening. So when we're thinking about standards, there are actual separate standards for each one of those areas, and they all fall under the umbrella of literacy, which means when you're choosing a program and materials, you're looking for all of those pieces. Again, it's not just reading, which oftentimes people associate with literacy. Thank you. So in order to help us have an idea around a collective vision and what we're looking for, we wanted to do something that's called empathy interviews. And we did this with stakeholder groups. And this is really intentional when we think about equity, because we want to acknowledge the voices that are throughout our community. And sometimes when you just bring a group of people together, you're not acknowledging all voices. So you want to be intentional in how you're pulling people together. And the other idea behind empathy interviews is you really want a story to be told. So you're asking folks, you know, what are your hopes for our kids? What are your concerns? Tell us about your own experiences learning how to read. Were they good? Were they bad? And I'll tell you, we did some giggling when we listened to some staff members, because they were pretty funny when they went back in time and reflected on learning how to read. So that's sort of the framing of this work. And I'm going to invite Rosa Maria and Tony also to chime in a bit about the empathy interviews and the focus groups. But you'll see in this list who we've met with so far. Again, it was intentional so that we could acknowledge and lift voices. So go ahead, Tony and Rosa Maria, tell us a little bit about your work.
Thank you, Teresa. We, like Teresa said, we wanted to be intentional with the groups that we met. So we had, many invitations were sent out. We sent it out to the, in general, to cast a net of who would come to these, but also have specific people that we were inviting based on for very different reasons. We worked with principals. We worked with our bilingual homeschool liaisons to get people to come to the table and have these conversations. So it was a great process. We learned a lot having these conversations. And, it's something that we want to include as part of our regular routine and process in our work so that we can inform what we're doing.
Yep. And this is really like a research methodology. So what you're doing then, and Tony will go into this, is you're recording all of the answers to these kind of overarching questions, and then you're coding it to look for themes and patterns across these different groups for commonalities.
Now, these are some of the quotes that we kind of stood out to us as encompassing some of the general ideas from all these different groups. We heard about students wanting to see themselves in the curriculum, wanting to receive authentic feedback so they can take ownership of their own learning, parents who want their students' individual needs to be met, and then students being valued and worthy of our investment.
You heard Teresa talk about the coding of these responses, and as we dug through the qualitative data that we gleaned from 9 or 10 different focus groups, we were looking at well over 1,000 pieces of data that we then, Rosemarie and I, worked to code and determine what the themes were as we read through that data. It's kind of a mini qualitative action research project that we kind of geeked out on, to be quite honest with you. But the things that we find fun are odd at times. But these themes that you see on this slide came across loud and clear. When we looked at all of the different pieces of data that we had, and we looked at the themes that had the most occurrences. These are the top 6 occurrence themes that rose out of the qualitative data set that we used. And when Teresa refers to developing that vision, this is really important information for us to have, not only as we establish that vision for what we want literacy to be for our kids in our community, but also for how we use that to inform our decision-making about adoption of a resource. And it was critical for us to get this input from people at the ground level, from groups at the ground level, across the entire spectrum of stakeholders in this community, because that's the kind of inclusive decision-making we want to, use to make great decisions. And so you can read those themes. Cultural relevance and equity was the top theme, and I think we recognize that, and we carry that forward in work that we do across a lot of our different lines of interaction with the district and the stakeholders. But you can see those others there, and I think as we go through the rest of the adoption presentation, as you see summer school presentations, as you see presentations about other things, you'll see some of these themes come across in those as well.
I just want to mention too, so we'll get into some other pieces, but this is also then informing the materials, because we're looking for evidence of these things in our materials. And when we talk also, the joy of reading came up a lot in this concept of literacy identity, and confidence that our students have. Confidence as readers and as writers was another reoccurring theme. High expectations was an interesting conversation, and I think that can lead to some calibrating around when we say high expectations, what do we mean? And so, again, to Tony's point, this will help to shape our vision and some of the decisions that we're making going forward, including within the context of all of this, the materials. And so we have the themes and what our educators and our families are saying their hopes and dreams are for this vision. And we also know what research tells us about effective reading and literacy instruction. So these are some big bullet points that really are not disputed in the literacy community too much. That effective reading instruction requires 2 types of instruction. You have to have a foundational skills piece and comprehension through building knowledge. You do that in a way in which the text is organized within materials. Foundational reading skills must be taught explicitly and systematically. Fluency is the bridge between decoding and comprehension, and background knowledge increases comprehension, right? So there's something called the baseball study, and what that shows is if you came to the table knowing a whole bunch about baseball, you most likely did better in a comprehension test than coming to the table not knowing anything about baseball. Fluency is the bridge, and the last one, that cultural relevance is a key component to building those literate identities. So kids have to see themselves in the text, right? They want to attach to a book. So when I have a literate identity, I can say, these are the 3 or 4 books that impacted me as an individual in life. This is part of my literate identity. I am a reader. I am a writer. And so, again, kids have to see themselves in text, in pictures, right, to develop a healthy literate identity.
One of the things that we looked at as well was the research on biliteracy, because we are a dual language district, but we also want to maintain cohesiveness between our general mainstream English program as well as our biliteracy, our dual language program, so DLI. So this is some of the research that is used in the guiding principles for dual language education for the Center for Applied Linguistics. As you can see there, the goals are that we want our students to be not only bilingual, but bicultural, with that sociocultural competence, and biliterate, being able to read and write, listen and speak in 2 languages. The importance of using the first language as a basis for learning a second language. So developing that first language strongly helps develop a second language as well. And then focusing on the 4 domains of language, as Teresa spoke about earlier with the reading, writing, listening, and speaking. That is what literacy is. And so students can build their content knowledge as well as the language that goes along with it.
That's important because when you're looking at materials, you want to have those scaffolds in there, and you want to have this promotion of speaking and listening, right? Because oral comprehension comes before written and read comprehension. And so that's an important key piece when you're looking through materials. Okay, so when we think about the research and we think about the themes, we landed on our localized criterion. And so Tony, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. As we relaunched this, the pilots at the end of last summer coming into the school year, we wanted to make sure that we had certain criterion that were being met as we developed an approach to a pilot that would really result in a resource adoption that would not just last for a couple of years, but have sustainability really over the course of a generation of students. When we look at the materials that are available to districts across the country, Beloit is unique in that not all districts, as Teresa and Rosa Maria have talked about, are dual language districts. And for us to be able to find high quality materials that meet our needs in both the monolingual side and the dual language side, it's getting easier. There are more resources available, but we wanted to be very clear that the resources we were going to choose from had to be very high quality. And so we used EdReports, which is kind of a standard nationwide for looking at available resources in 3 criteria. You can see those criteria on there as far as usability and alignment, things like that. And so that was our starting point. But then we also wanted to step back and say, what do we need in the school district Beloit? Because sometimes you adopt a resource and the research behind it does not show that it's going to be a good resource for your particular school district. And I think that's something that we wanted to make sure we addressed as we went through this adoption. So we looked at various components, including equity. Teresa talked about the importance of foundational skills, and we wanted to make sure that both of the pilots that we implemented this year had really strong, robust foundational components. One of the things that we look at is how we use assessment within our curricular resources to guide instruction. It's kind of that assessment for learning and of learning. And another one of the criteria that we wanted to look at was, do these resources have those assessments embedded so that we're not layering on other assessments on top of students? We're able to kind of assess within the context of the class and really use that information not only to inform our practice, but also for reporting purposes to DPI and other things outside of the school district. Then also looking at multiculturalism and technology. In this day and age, the technology components that we use have to really be robust because our students are high-level consumers of technology. We have to make sure that those tools are engaging. And then as far as multiculturalism, this came across clearly in our qualitative research. It also is evident when we talk to students and community members about our kids need to see themselves within the resources that we use. That's critical for us as a district striving to develop multicultural. culturally responsive pedagogical opportunities for kids. Again, as Dr. Keyser came in last July, we had a discussion about the status of the literacy pilots from last spring, and we had some discussions about how to move forward. And Dr. Keyser was really firm on the idea that we will adopt one resource within the district, bringing the dual language and the monolingual programs together. And I think that was a critical choice or decision on our part, because I think for the time I've been in the role of a director here at COLAC, and the time that Rosa Maria has been a part of this program, we've seen the struggle that we've had to bring those programs together. And this is a great opportunity to do that. And that was probably, one of the biggest catches or opportunities that we needed to make the most out of in this process. And then also, we've looked at the resource that we've had K-5 over the last 7-8 years, and the stagnation of our data within the use of that resource. And that was a very clear indicator to us at central office in the teaching learning department that we needed to address our achievement issues by making sure that the resources that we have are high quality. And the resources that we have been using have not made the muster in terms of that quality report. And so that was another thing that we wanted to address.
Okay, so the process that we used for the pilot, like Tony had said, we continued the pilot this year. We increased the number of teachers that were participating, which in turn increased the amount of input that we had from the teachers. So we spent a lot of time gaining insight and understanding, talking to teachers, having these meetings, surveying them on a continual basis throughout the pilot. Because we do value their input, we understand that they will be the ones that will be directly using these materials with the students. So throughout the pilots, as you can see, as far as the evaluation, that was also our communication process that we used. We had the teachers fill out rubrics for us. We also had them fill out surveys. We took the questions on the survey and made questions so that we could have vertical teams, so that a kindergarten teacher and a 5th grade teacher within the same group talking about the strengths of each of the resources and how a certain resource meets needs at different grade levels. That was very important as well. And then the empathy groups, we took that information, as you had seen earlier, to make this decision.
And so we could really use all of the research we've done for this pilot as a master's thesis, or some of us off of the all but dissertation list, perhaps. But the feedback that we got from the staff was critical. Just the idea of increasing the pilots from a group of 10 to a group of 40, and really lengthening those pilots out to give them an opportunity to get deep into the resources was really important. And so as we went through the rubric, we went through the survey, we had a nice mix of quantitative and qualitative data. And you can see the numbers on the page as far as, the feedback that we got about ReadyGen as a resource, the feedback that we got about the American Reading Company resource, and what those numbers look like. On the second, in the middle of that same page, you see we did a plus delta, from those vertical teams about some of the strengths and some of the areas of growth of both resources, and we included that information for you. And as we processed through the mountain of information of data that we had, it became clear through the conversations that we were having with teachers, through the data points that we were examining and analyzing, that ARC was the best resource for our school district. And so the final piece that we kind of looked at was just how that overall vertical team really looked at, their choice as far as a resource. And while it wasn't unanimous, it was pretty darn close. And I think we're very comfortable with the idea that this is the staff's choice, the pilot teacher's choice, as far as a resource they feel comfortable with to improve literacy for the students of the school district of Beloit.
I just wanted to bring attention to one thing, on this slide, is one of the pluses for dual language is the cross-linguistic connections, and then the delta for ARC is clear identified by literacy pathway. There is a reason for that. Within dual language, there are different modes of instruction and curriculum and how it's delivered to the students, whereas ReadyGen, the way that they do it is that it's a complementary unit. The students are learning things that are complementary. It's different, so that, but in ARC, it's the same unit. And the reason that's important to state is because with complementary, when you're doing something complementary, there is still the task of not only teaching the content, but the language that's attached to the content. And that does become a little bit of a burden on the students, especially if they are in the early stages of developing their second language. With ARC, it takes away some of that burden because they are learning the content through both of the languages that they are developing, whether it be the one that they prefer, whether it be English or Spanish, but also the teachers can take more time to develop those cross-linguistic connections without having that burden of having to also teach the content. So it does change things a little bit, but it's, as we learn more and as we develop our teachers more, that's something else that we considered as well.
Okay, so we're going to move into just the last leg of this, which is our recommendations and next steps. And so just to take us back to that board goal of, right, that this desire amongst all of us to improve the outcomes in literacy for our kids. And so we have to do that really through a braided approach. And that braided approach are these three areas: application of high quality standards aligned materials. Once we have that, we have to think about focused professional development or job embedded professional development and coaching cycles. And the last piece of this is strong instructional practices implemented with integrity. We have to find something that, when we're working with a company, has job embedded professional development, in a sense that it's not just learning about unwrapping the boxes and learning about the materials, but it's also the instructional practices and the reason why the materials are organized the way that they are. And so that's the approach that we wanted to take going forward. So when we're working with the company in our recommendation with ARC, we're asking for that type of approach in our partnership and collaboration with them. And so next slide, please. So here we have our next steps, and Tony and Rosa Maria will finish us out.
Yep. So as Teresa talked about a little bit, the making a high quality resource available for our students and our staff is our number one priority. We've done a lot of research around both of the resources that we had. We've took a lot of time to get input from staff, and so by adopting a high quality resource, we're going to be taking a big step in the right direction. But that's just the beginning. The interesting thing about implementation over the course of several years, and I alluded earlier that this resource has potential to be our resource for a generation of students because we have evidence that it's been done in other school districts. The idea that you can do a one and done implementation or have a couple of sessions in August and be ready to roll is not the case at all. Curricular resources in this day and age, teaching in this day and age is a complex endeavor. And so I think the opportunity that we have over the course of the next 2 or 3 years to really look at professional development as part of a deeper implementation of our early literacy program is going to be a big opportunity for the school district. So that's a big part of how we implement this, is by making sure that professional development is included in a robust fashion year one and then ongoing after that. And so when we look at this quote is for the 2021-2022 school year, primarily around the resources and the technology resources. But moving forward, and you'll see that on the next slide, there is a commitment from us to continue the professional development moving forward into the future, because that's something else that rang loud and clear in our discussions with our professional educators.
Mm-hmm. So as you can see, the components of American Reading Company, there's a lot there that can be available to our teachers. It gives the teachers the tools they need to respond to their students' individual learning needs, the assessment that goes along with this, with this resource is very thorough. It addresses different areas of literacy, and it has a toolkit that also goes along that helps teachers, it develops the teachers' knowledge about how to respond to the students by giving them, step-by-step instructions about, if your student needs this, then this is what you should do to practice, and then continual formative assessments is part of it as well. So, and it's available in physical form, it's available online for our teachers and for our students. And as well, it has scaffolds for English learners, it has culturally relevant resources, and can be used in the dual language program as well, because it's supportive of language development.
So as we go through this presentation and get to the point of discussion about, the board's process as far as moving our recommendation forward, we wanted to really capture some of the kind of bigger picture ideas with this resource. First of all, when we look at adopting the American Reading Company resource for our K-5 literacy, it's really I wrote it down here. I wanted a multi-function resource, because what we, as a part of this resource, we get a very robust diagnostic assessment tool that is really going to shed new light on how we operate in early literacy and how we operate on literacy potentially all the way through high school. And I think that's something that we really want to have the board focus on as you think about this decision. Is this package is comprehensive. It includes those diagnostics. It includes resources that are both physical and digital. It includes professional development, not only for teachers, but also for our building leaders, our principals, so that they can develop ownership and understanding of literacy at that level as well, because I think that's a huge partnership potential. When we look at using the funding sources that we'll use to make this adoption a reality, we're at a very opportune time with the ESSER funds and the other stimulus funds that are available, because this can be a zero cost adoption for the district based on those stimulus funds that are coming available. When we looked at the resource and we were trying to go through what we wanted to include in this package, it was important to us that we include all 4 units for all of the grade levels. So every one of our kindergarten through 5th grades will have all 4 units, or have access to 4 units for each of those grade levels. All grade levels will have the ERLA and the ANIL, which are the English and Spanish versions of that diagnostic assessment that I was talking about. We will have a district-assigned implementation coach that will be available to us to partner with us on the implementation. We'll have 90 days of professional development. And this kind of threw me because I've been through an adoption before. When we adopted ReadyGen several years back for our dual language program, this kind of robust professional development is really critical to making sure that this implementation is successful. I already talked about the ARC Leadership Learning Series for our principals, and making sure that over the course of 8 days next year, those elementary and intermediate principals will have high-level professional development so that they understand, as building instructional leaders, what literacy should look like in those classrooms. And then something else that's kind of interesting about our professional development kind of vision over the course of the next couple of years is our district's going to be undergoing a little bit of a transition where we start to move our ESL teachers to be biliteracy coaches and add them to the teams of coaches that we already have. And that's going to help us develop a train-the-trainer model or approach to professional development over the course of the next couple of years. As we work closely with ARC during year 1 and even going into year 2, our grander vision is for us to eventually be able to kind of gradually release from the amount of PD that ARC does with us and develop that internal expertise so that over time, our coaches, our teachers are going to be the ones designing high-level professional development for our staff. So that really kind of wraps everything up as far as this package and what we're looking at. There are some costs moving forward that the Teaching, Learning, and Equity Department is committed to, and that's really based on ongoing digital access for students and then some professional development costs, moving into year 2. And as we go into years 3, 4, and 5, that cost will diminish as we take more ownership for that PD. I hope I covered all the bullet points on that slide.
Thank you. And just the last 2 slides are just additional research that's informed our work, and a thank you. So we're set for questions.
Okay, thank you for that very thorough explanation. And I'll open it up to the board, to the committee members as far as questions that they may have. The first one will come from Board Member Anderson.
So, I gotta say this was a really nice presentation. It covered all the questions I had written down on things I wanted answered, which you guys hit every single one of them. The one that kind of came up as I was listening to this was you said that, so we're looking at using this as a long-term kind of solution for us, and you said that other districts have used this. So have they told you guys kind of how many districts have used this and how long they've had been using this, just so that we kind of have an idea of okay, it's not like they're just year 1 and they're saying they're going to go to year 2. So I'm just...
We, and forgive me, I don't have them at the top of my head. I have to search for the list, but when I asked them what districts were using this that were similar to us, they gave me several districts that were near the Chicago area that were a bit smaller but highly diverse. And I did do my own little research, looking at their websites and their school report cards that they posted on their websites, and they're good. I mean, they do look good. But that's anecdotal. I didn't write it out or give you any specifics on that, but. Yeah, that's in my experience.
The consultant that we're working with supports, I believe it's Wauwatosa, or I don't know if it's Wauwatosa, but West Chicago is one of our big clients. And there, as Rosa Maria said, there are other districts within the area. The thing that I think but was important for us to remember was they typically embark on these relationships with a 10-year time frame in mind. The idea that when I talk about a generation of students being a part of or having access to these resources, these tools, this pedagogy, that's what I'm referring to. They expect districts to be, using their resource for 10 to 15 years. And that's really unheard of in this business. And the thing about the American Reading Company is they've been this resource is over 30 years. The development of it, initial research started in the late or early 90s and continues all the way up to this day. Rosa Maria and I and our district staff have been going to professional development put on by ARC around all of these concepts all year. They are very, and I think Teresa mentioned this, their board of directors and the people that are involved with this company and this resource are the highest levels of expertise in the field of literacy nationwide. And that's a testament to their research base, and it's a testament to the work that they're doing, not just to implement this, but to implement for sustainability and longevity.
Mm-hmm. And besides being experts in literacy, they're also experts in equity. Many of the speakers that we've logged into webinars to watch them speak have been, top names in equity work.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I'm happy to hear that they're kind of hoping for people to use this for 10 to 15 years because as educators know, it's rough when you start to change and you develop and then you suddenly have a change of course of we're going to go do this now. So I'm happy to see that now. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Delgado had an emergency, so she stepped out of the meeting. I do have some questions, though, and I guess a few of them are revolving around the pilot itself, and I'm assuming, and I guess I've worked with on the board long enough and been on committees when we had a different committee structure to see different curriculums that have been approved. Is it typical that we have had the pilot programs in the past? And because it seems as though having gone through that, it gave you a kind of an idea to be able to try it out, and which is good. And obviously get some feedback from staff members, which is critical because they're the ones that ultimately are using it. So I guess the question is the pilot typical of curriculum testing to see if it's something you're going to adopt? And secondly, kind of along that lines, do you feel as though the pilot would have been any different, the results of that between the two organizations or the two programs, if we would not have been in COVID?
I can answer the first part, and why don't you take the second part, Tony?
Okay.
So the first part is using a pilot before you adopt materials would be considered in the business best practice. And actually, Beloit has been participating with the Department of Public Instruction with this sort of like a high quality materials work. And one of the groups that we have had an opportunity to connect with is a group called Instruction Partners, and they help to lay out a strategy and an implementation plan. And so part of that work is doing a pilot or a field study is another way to call it. And so that is definitely best practice because for all the reasons you said, we want to try it on for size. We want to hear feedback from the people that are actually teaching it. And we want to make a decision that is an informed one, that isn't just one that's coming from the sale of a book company, right? And so that is definitely best practice. Tony, did you want to answer the second one about COVID?
Yeah, we would just like to commend the staff for, this has been an extraordinary endeavor for them to do something so different and so outside of, what they would normally do as far as, moving away from the resources that they've used for years, potentially for some of them, and at such extraordinary times. I don't think the outcomes would have been different at all, to be quite honest with you, had we been in person. And I think, to be quite honest with you, it may have even been more lopsided than it already was in terms of some of the feedback that we got about professional development in particular, and some of those things. I think it would have been even more clear than it already is. So I don't think the outcome would have been any different, John.
Great. Thank you very much. Did you have something to add?
All I wanted to add into what Ms. Martek and Mr. Bosco had shared was, I think one thing that was learned because of the pandemic is the attention to materials that lend themselves to multi-mode instruction. So I don't know, had this pandemic happened, we would have looked as intentionally into how does this work when we try to do it at a distance. But to the overall work with DPI and instruction partners, DPI's current vision and under the outgoing state superintendent has been around, DPI has not done as much as it feels it could have done in helping districts navigate how you institute best practices for curricular design. And so everything that they have demonstrated, we have embedded into our curricular design and review process. So you can expect this process to be followed moving forward with other curricular adoptions.
That's really good to hear because obviously we want to have the best material available for all of our students. Thanks for all those questions or the answers to the questions on the pilot. I did have one last question, and that is that I'm assuming that with the stimulus dollars that are available for this, are those dollars that were not needed elsewhere? And I guess I'm assuming that's a very positive thing, that we're able to have the stimulus money available and not have to spend our own money. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, Ms. Martek, if you don't mind me jumping in first on the conversations as the thumbs up comes. So when we think about the vision of being purpose-driven and the fact that we have a short-term goal that is focused on literacy, and we've talked about how literacy is a key to unlocking all sorts of other areas. The fact that it's intentional. We started with the district goals around literacy and focusing in on developing a vision for literacy and then using that as the springboard for our process. This is an investment in the thing that we feel is going to be the greatest lever to supporting our long-term growth moving forward. So meeting with Joanne and looking at the parameters in which we can use the stimulus money, what this has done is has taken a 3-year implementation and has allowed us to implement the bulk of it now for no cost to our local dollars, and it has allowed the teaching and learning department to build within their budget sustainability for that 10-year growth and sustainability moving forward. So yes, had the stimulus money not been here, we would probably be sharing the same outcome, but talking about a 3-year roll phase in with certain grade levels year 1, other grade levels year 2, and so forth. So we took something that potentially was a 5-year and we were able to shrink it down because of this support from the federal government.
Great, that's good to hear. Board Member Delgado is back again, thankfully. So she does have a question or two, so go ahead.
First of all, I really apologize for missing the whole presentation. So I do have a few questions, and I'm going to start out by the things that I really, really liked from based on what I have read prior to the meeting, which was materials being available in Spanish and English, which will support the DLI program, because I know that there has been struggle where the material might not align currently from what we have, to the other regular classes, which with that kind of segregates, working in collaboration with other teachers and that. So that's really great. The other great part about it is that it's coming from funds that are not regular funds for the school, which is awesome. But one of the questions that I did have is, how often do we normally switch curriculums? Like, what is the process for that, and how long has it been since we had a switch?
So the last time we did a massive core adoption for all of the sites was, when I looked it up, was 2014. And so that's within the parameters of a typical cycle that we should be looking at materials.
Okay, and I'm sorry if this is a repeat, but just for my records, were staff able to provide input in the switching of the curriculum? Were they involved in this decision making? Because I really think that it's so important to make sure that your staff, the members that actually do the job that provide all that education and work with the curriculum, are involved. Were they involved in this?
Board Member Delgado, thank you for that question. We couldn't agree with you more. And we'll be happy to follow up with you given your emergency. But if you look back in the slide deck, slides 9 through 12 address that because of the running the pilots and then all of the surveying and both qualitative and quantitative data that we got from staff.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Specifically slide 12.
Got it. That was all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, hearing none. This is an actionable item. So if someone wishes to entertain a motion, that would be appreciated.
I move to recommend to the full Board of Education the purchase of the American Reading Company's K-5 literacy materials in the amount of $1,839,910.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the table for to move to recommend to the full Board of Education the purchase of the American Reading Company's K through 5 literacy materials in the amount of $1,839,910. Do we need to put in there at all something along the lines of where that funding's coming from, or is that not necessary? Or is it known?
I don't believe you need to, but because we put it in with the presentation, and it also has it under the budget source, the federal stimulus funds. So it's listed in there.
Okay. Okay, so the motion's on the table. We have a second. Any further discussion?
I would actually feel more comfortable if it was included in that motion to include where the funding is coming from so that it can be clear stated and written. Can we do an amendment to that?
Yes, we would need to do an amendment to that.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the current motion, which is to add on that the funding will come from federal, make sure I get this right here, federal stimulus funds. Okay, do we have a second to that amendment?
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment, first of all? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the amendment to add in the funding will come from the federal stimulus funds signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And so now we move on to the actual recommendation itself, which once again is move to recommend the full Board of Education the purchase of American Reading Company's K through 5 literacy materials in the amount of $1,839,910 that is coming from the federal stimulus funds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, great. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very well done. I really like the idea of the pilot and the fact that we had great input from many, many people. So good job. And hopefully that'll pass at the end of the month. Okay, the next meeting we have is going to be, you'd think I would have this down by now. Okay, I'm hearing it's May 4th. So Planning and Budget will meet on Tuesday, May 4th at 5:15. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
All right. So, hi everybody. It is 6:48, and at this time, I'd like to call our governance committee meeting to order. So, would somebody like to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next we have the approval of the minutes, which the last time we met apparently was September 22nd of 2020. So I will admit that though I had the opportunity to go back and watch this meeting, I did not do so, so I'm not going to weigh in on the minutes. Board members Wong or Levy, do you have any comments on the minutes? Or are we ready to move their approval?
I move approval.
All right, is there a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the September of 2020 minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. All right, so the only item that we have this evening is our committee structure. Dr. Kieser was kind enough to put together a presentation in terms of reformatting, switching the committee structure for me oriented to the topic versus the timeline for board business. And then we also had a discussion piece about reformatting the composition of the committee structures from including only board members to expanding it out to district staff or to district staff and community members. So since Dr. Kieser took the time to put together this lovely presentation, why don't we start with his work and then we can weigh in on that and then we'll move to the next item if that's okay.
This was more talking points, just so that I don't ramble on forever, which I've been known to do. But really, in the conversations that Board President Miller and I have had in terms of the committee structure, so our current committee structure is, as best explained to me, has been around timelines. So you have the future plans, you've got your current plans, and then ideally, at some point, when the budget gets adopted, the individuals on these committees would like switch committees, but I don't think we did that this year. And then we have policy and personnel, which is fairly self-explanatory. When looking back at board policies, and this is not a verbatim from policy, but it's a summary of some of the bullet points. There's definitely some crossovers in particular where it talks about facilities and property and the development and recommendations for use of. My suggestion in the conversations that I had with Board President Miller that I want to bring to the committee for consideration is if we were to move back to the idea of having a committee structure that was more focused on the type of work that needs to be done. So we used to have an instructional committee, but I almost titled it, well, I didn't almost, my suggestion would be to title it in terms of the departments, so the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and People Services Committee. So they would handle all of, in essence, the instructional side of the house. Business Operations Finance Committee would handle basically everything that isn't on the instructional side of the house. So financials, properties, facilities, plans, contracts like with Airmark, Durham, TC Networks, and so forth. And actually handle some of the human resources pieces. So where we would talk about salary and benefits, because that fits in with budgets and finances. That would be the two biggest changes to the committee structure. For policy and personnel, what I would suggest is that we separate policy from the human resources side, only so much as that the human resources side is really relegated to employment recommendations, and that we could, in looking back, most of our conversations have been roughly around 30 minutes in length, that if we were to do those just prior to the full board meetings. We could do it as a committee of the whole for employment recommendations, and that way we could actually approve them and not have to add them as an agenda item onto the regular board meeting if we did as a committee of the whole. Then we would just simply have policy meet and do the work of policy. And then no changes for the governance committee as it currently is structured. So how might this look like? Some possible considerations for the committee to look at. If we were to take the same kind of structure that we have, so in place of budget and planning the first Tuesday, we would do teaching, learning, and equity and people services at the normal time, about 5 o'clock. That second week where we would normally have our regular board meeting, we would have the business operations finance from 5 to 6:30. 6:30 to 7, we would do our employment recommendations and then go right into the regular board meeting at 7. And then in week 4, we would just do policy work from 5 to 6:30, do our employment recommendations, and then go into the regular board meeting. This still takes 3 of the 4 Tuesdays in a normal month. But just because that got my brain going, I thought of what other scenarios could we tackle. Sometimes we want to spend more time in policy, so maybe moving policy to that first week and making it by itself. Or if we wanted to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility in terms of looking at the month holistically, moving policy in alignment with either week 2 or week 4, but just on a different day. And that leaves 2 weeks in a month where we wouldn't typically have any board or committee work. So in a nutshell, that was what was swirling in my brain, kind of condensed down on paper for the committee to ponder and ask questions about. And then if we decide to make a decision, I have some language in the board docs for us.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation, Dr. Kieser. Are there any questions at this time?
Perfect. All right, there we go. Thank you all. I really like the second option because I really enjoy having that third week when I know I don't have any board commitments, and I can tie up some loose ends there. So that second model is great. Are you proposing that the committees, as you have presented them, will handle current and future needs? So since there wouldn't be a planning and budget committee looking forward, these committee structures would handle both.
Exactly. So for instance, the teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services would handle all future curricular decisions and curricular resource adoptions, but also provide all the updates for student achievement reports and AGR and all those things that are currently happening this year. So yes, they would handle that entire gamut of current and future for that. And then on the budget planning and finance side, same thing, but just those topics.
Perfect. And then the other portion of that question is, and Board President Miller alluded to it, so feel free to push back if this is going to happen later in the discussion, but what will be the structure of this committee? If it's not just board members, if it's going to be members of the admin team and potentially community members, what do you envision that structure looking like?
That's a great question, and one that I am going to defer to Board President Miller to talk more about, simply because it's a new structure to myself, having non-board members be a part of that. So as I shared with her, I'm open to the discussion and learning alongside everyone else with that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kieser. So the way that we used to have committees, we did have district staff, so it wouldn't necessarily just be the admin team. It could be like a reading specialist at, Robinson wants to jump on, or whoever's interested, kind of. So we would open up we get to kind of toss around some ideas tonight. My vision for it was if we had 2 board members, like for quorum purposes. So of course anybody can come because they're public meetings, right? So if we had like 2 board members, 2 district staff, and 1 community member, in the city, their committee structure is like almost all community members, 1 administrator, and 1 council member. And I know that sometimes they struggle to meet quorum. So this balance would give us a heavier balance toward the district with more reliability for people who will attend. So, because like the big thing is we don't want to delay any of the board business. And this would not apply to policy. This would just be for the teaching, learning. Okay, I'm going to miss all of the acronyms here, but for the first 2 on here, like the business one and the teaching and learning one, we would open that up to the community for like 1 voting slot. And one thing that we could talk about is opening up for additional slots that are just non-voting members. Like there's a whole different, like there's a lot of stuff we can do. So we can talk about it later if you want to, like in the meeting once we kind of get through Dr. Kieser's stuff. But just to give you a quick vision, that's a potential that we could consider.
Yeah, I'll make comments on this. I think that having been in the previous committee structures before, I did find a lot of value in having staff members involved. I was specifically involved in the curriculum side of things and being relatively new and not knowing a whole lot because I'm not an educator. It was extremely beneficial to be able to bring me up to speed faster. And I respected the information that those staff members brought to the table. It was very nice because we had representation from elementary, intermediate, and the high school. I think that I like the structure of this. I've talked to some different people who have their beliefs on how we should structure things. Going back to the actual committee structure, I do have some difficulty with committee members or a committee member being from the public, and it's nothing that I have against the community. It's just that understanding the volume of material that we have as board members to learn about everything, and then to have a committee member coming in that may have no knowledge on it. And my guess would be we would try to bring people in that do have knowledge on it. I don't know. I think, I'm not saying it could be a non-voting position, but is it just there to provide, I guess, transparency? I mean, I think that's perhaps part of it. I like the structure here. I like the timing of it. I think that hopefully we create efficiencies, which we desperately need in this board, and we need to get to that level fast. I think that's a big issue with this board that I would like to see changed. But other than that, I'm fine with it. I think that the structure is very good. I mean, one is focused on the children, and the other one's focused more on finances and the buildings. It makes sense to me. I think the policy, and I like the idea of the HR being before the meeting, and that way we can hopefully alleviate problems with the HR situation, the personnel issues that we've faced in the past. So I guess that's all the comments I have.
Are there any other questions or comments for Dr. Kieser at this time?
Just a quick comment. I think it would be amazing to have community input, but I don't think it should be a voting position because I think that people vote for us in order to be diligent about and consistent about doing that work. So that would be awkward for me, and I think may undermine like the electoral process, et cetera. But I would love to have community input. I would love to have input from buildings with the work that we're doing.
I actually have a question for John. I was wondering, like, so hearing what Board Member Levy just said, do you feel like if we had a balance of, like, let's say 5 voting members on each committee, if we had like an elementary, an intermediate, and a high school representation, is that something that you would find valuable as we're going into the discussion of the composition of committees?
Are you talking about? Yes, absolutely. I think it's critical that we have the balance there. I guess one of the other questions would be what's the selection process, and what's the process of having committee members from staff? And you want it to be equitable. You want to get people that are, and I think that we could get a very good draw of some outstanding representatives from the district. I think people would really be. I know from my experience on the committee that I served on and I chaired, I had some fantastic committee members, and they were very dedicated to the position. So I don't see that being a problem at all. I would agree with Board Member Levy. I think that, if we want to have a person on there, it definitely would be a non-voting position. I think that, hopefully somebody would step up to the plate and want to do that. It may turn out to not be a non-position for all we know. I don't know.
No, I appreciate you. Thanks for filling me in on that, because I know you had just mentioned that you liked that there was representation from all levels, and I just didn't know if that was a direction that we might want to consider. That makes sense. Yeah, no, I definitely hear what both of you are saying for sure. It's so weird because it's nice to see on a screen because you don't have to so sorry. Anyway, yes, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So let's put a pin in the composition, and in terms of, it sounds like Vice President Wong, it sounds like you like Dr. Keyser's proposed structure. And did you have a preference for which calendar that you are leaning toward?
I really don't. I mean, what's really appealing is if you had number 3, because you'd only be committed for only 2 weeks of the month. The other ones, I guess I'm so used to having multiple meetings and throughout the month that to me it doesn't really matter that much. And I think that depending upon which committees you happen to be on, you might be, you might have 3 weeks, which I think has been very typical. But I have no preference either way.
Thank you. And then Board Member Levy, you like 2?
Actually, number 3. I like having weeks 2 and 4 committed to the work, and then 1 and 3 if you need to research, if you need to ask questions, etc. I prefer calendar 3.
Awesome. So both of you have weighed in, and I'm glad that you did, because I also like calendar 3 the best for exactly that reason. And I was just thinking, one of our kind of goals that we talked about was just to increase that communication with administration ahead of the meeting, so we have time to get things answered and it's more efficient in our actual meeting time. So I feel like that would give us good space, and hopefully is more respectful of their time and kind of gives everybody a little more balance. So thank you, Dr. Keyser, for putting these different permutations together, and it sounds like we're leaning toward 3. Yeah, no, thank you. In terms of, let me just jump back to board docs really quick, because I think that there is I'm sorry, I was looking at policy. I got to get back into the meeting. Anyway, I think that there was some proposed what am I trying to say? Motion language. Maybe there wasn't. Yeah, there was. Okay. So what I would say is, I guess I want to hear from Board Member Levy and Vice President Wong in terms of your comfort in changing the composition. I feel like I was looking over kind of the scope of this committee, and I think that it's fine if we take action here in terms of the structure, because then something would come through policy. We would rewrite the policy, and then that would come to the full board. And even though it would probably land on, we probably wouldn't put it on consent. It would probably come as an action item once it comes to your committee, so we could all discuss it as a full board. Does that sound okay to everybody so far? Yeah, okay. And then in terms of changing the composition, I'm curious if we want to, and if that needs to be a full board discussion first, just because that's going to be a huge kind of culture shift for us. Would everybody be comfortable if we decide to go forward with doing not just board members on there? Are we okay with just bringing that directly to the full board for a discussion, and if that's the direction we want to go, it would go down to policy, we would write the policy, and then it would come back for approval to the full board? Does that make sense?
You mean bring the suggested calendar and structure and the membership changes all together?
So what I'm thinking is splitting it. So what I'm thinking is if we, as the governance committee, yes, I think it's in the scope of our committee to vote and just say here's our new calendar. And and this is the direction that we want to go to in terms of the structure is. That structure then goes to policy. Policy writes the new committee policy language. That comes to the full board. We talk about it some more just to make Vice President Wong happy, and then we pass it, hopefully, and then we move on with our lives. But so then on a separate track, the composition piece is kind of a separate piece. So I'm wondering if we would feel okay bringing that piece to the full board first, having a discussion to see if we even want to go in that direction. If we find a consensus and agree on this is how we want to change the composition, then it would go to policy and then come back to the full board, is what I'm thinking. What do you think?
I think it may make sense to initially go to the full board so you can get those top level questions. So policy is not spinning our wheels to craft something and then you take it to the full board and the response is, what in the world? You didn't think about this. If you have the information tonight, just for curiosity's sake and because it's on the agenda, I would like to hear about what your thoughts are, potentials for how these committees will be constructed. And then as I was thinking about it, if we are potentially having voting staff members, then I would be open to a conversation about having voting community members, because nothing is decided in committee. It's going to go to the full board where only board members are voting at that point. So as I thought through that, I am open to hearing kind of both sides of that.
Absolutely. Vice President Wong, any thoughts on the process?
I think taking it to the full board is critical. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to be going back and forth multiple times. I just have to chuckle because having been on the board now, I'm going on my 4th year. We've had 3 different committee structures in that short period of time. And so, I mean, there's board members that only understand the committee structure that we have today. So, any changes, obviously, I don't know if anybody's going to have much of an opinion or not. I guess having gone through multiple ones, it is different. I guess I've learned more, but I think, I think bring it to the full board first. Board Member Levy brings up an interesting point with the voting status. I would agree. I still have a difficult time with community members. I think that the difficulty is that the knowledge base. I just go back to the amount of information that we consume, and what I've learned in the 3-year period of time that I've been here, and just I don't know. And how many would there be? I guess would there be just the one, or would it be multiple?
Yeah, no, Vice President Wong, I appreciate that. So it would, in my original kind of rough draft version that I wanted to bring to us tonight, which is what I'm doing, I would think 1 as a voting member. I would be open. So that's why I kind of want to bring it to the full board, because if we do open that up, I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions on if and how we can incorporate non-voting members, if that's a thing we want to do. And I guess I've thought about this a lot, and I'm okay with whatever direction we go. I think is going to be a positive change regardless. So I'm open and optimistic for the future of our committees in general. For me, it's like we have a whole community who is very invested in the work of our school district, and what I found is that by being able to serve on a City of Beloit committee, like I was on EOC and now I'm on the library board, that really built up my ability to feel confident in participating in local governance. And I feel like that was a positive experience for me and the people that I served with. And not only does it promote people's understanding of how things work, it's a really great way for people who are interested maybe in future and running for the board, for them to kind of get involved and build that knowledge base. So I think there's a lot to what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. I also think that if we're looking long term and having like a long vision for how do we build sustainable, good leadership, I think opening doors to public participation is a good way to increase that community-wide knowledge base, and to also maybe groom future school board candidates who will then be, come to the table like knowledgeable and kind of be able to hit the ground running a little faster than people like me who had no, exposure to that. So that's a thought, but I don't discredit at all what you're saying. That's why I do think it would be a good full board discussion.
And I guess my final point on this, I think there could be a lot of positives that come out of this, and I would recommend that even if it's while we're writing the policy, et cetera, that we suspend policy first and test it. Because I don't want to commit to adopting new policy and we haven't tested out how it looks, and then we're kind of stuck and we have to start over.
Sure. And so, go ahead, Dr. Heiser.
No, I just was reflecting on the conversation because Board Member Levy, where you had started, that was my concern in terms of community participation. Was like the community elects all the board members, but through the discussion, and particularly Board President Miller, when you were saying, the idea of opening up opportunities for future board members or future individuals who will run for public office made me sit and reflect in terms of their participation. And I'm still like where my mind is on voting, non-voting, but I like the idea of the participation piece in terms of them, community members building knowledge and background and so forth. But I agree. I mean, all of us would certainly agree at the level of information input you take in just to make the conversations and ask the questions that's quite a bit to ramp up when you're not used to it. So.
No, thank you for that. Go ahead, Vice President Wong.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing you need to address is what happens if you say you throw it out there and you got 3 or 4 people that want to be on the committee. I mean,
So-
good problem, but I mean.
No, it's a great problem. And I know in the city, they have an appointment committee. They do like an appointment review. Ms. Shope, do you know how we appointed non-board members last time? Would you mind speaking to that? Nope. Okay, good.
So last time we had an application process. The application was available for people to fill out, both staff, students, and community members. We did not have any students that stepped up at all. We did have community members, and there were guidelines as to the community members and how they could apply. So for instance, they had to live in the community. They couldn't just work in the community but live elsewhere, things like that. And then the staff members could be anybody that was a staff member of any kind, not our, I don't believe we allowed the, what's the word, contracted staff members to participate, but any staff member that's employed by us could participate. And they had to fill out an application process as well. I feel the one thing that was a little confusing was when we asked people to rank, because at that time we had 5 committees that they could be a part of, so this is different if you're only going to do 2. But last time there were 5 committees, and we asked them to rank them in their preference order. Some people only ranked 1 or 2 of the 5, others ranked all 5. And then when the applications were reviewed by the board president at that time, and the board president decided, like looking at the different qualifications of people in which committee she felt they would fit best on, and tried to give as many people as possible their first or second choice, and then there were a couple that had to go to their third or fourth choice. We just kind of put them on there. She gave me the list and said, here's where people are going. And I felt that this time around, it would be best if we weren't giving people their first or second choice, that they should probably be asked if they really wanted to serve, because I felt there were a couple of people that never showed because they weren't happy with where they got placed. So it would be nice to say, do you want to serve on this committee even though it was your third or fourth choice, or would you rather be on like a waiting list, so if somebody has to leave a committee, you would then be asked to step up, or things like that. With it only being 2 committees, then I think you're going to have to decide maybe a different way of appointing, either with a group of people appointing, or maybe if everybody looks qualified, draw a name and then have them serve for X amount of time. I believe that we originally, we had criteria all set up, and so I have all of that you can use, but I believe it was for 1 year, and then we were going to rotate people off and other people on, kind of thing, and they ended up serving for like 1.5 years, and then we dismantled that type of committee and went to the newest form of committees. So, you just have to make those structures in place before you move forward. But I would have that type of application that you could look at and see if you like it, if you want to tweak it, modify it. Same thing with the criteria and things like that. But with the 2 committees, it should be much easier to figure out, how to rank those. Like you could have a first or second choice, or if you only want to serve on one and not the other. But that would be my only recommendation for change, would be making that clear that you don't have to pick a second if you don't want to serve on that committee, kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ms. Shope, thanks for bringing all that up and that history. That was probably one of the bigger problems that we did face, was we had committee members that were community members and they never showed. And it created quorum problems. And that happened on multiple committees, and I would agree that with only 2 committees, we probably wouldn't have that run into that problem. My concern is just the knowledge base and bringing somebody in that just the amount of the volume of information, especially when you start to look at that student section and even the building one. I mean, both of them. There's a lot of depth of information that has to be absorbed by an individual that may have no knowledge on that. Now, the hope would be that somebody's coming in because they understand it. They want to learn more. They want to be a key part of that. That's the hope of that. And if that's the case and you can fill it on a regular basis, consistent basis, okay, fine. But my concern would be what happens if that doesn't happen. I would have to say the staff members, outstanding. Always showed up, always prepared. That was very satisfactory. I like the idea of having representation from each discipline, I guess.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chopin. Thank you very much, Vice President Wong. Board Member Levy, did you have any other comments? You're good? Okay, so I just want to be clear as we prepare to kind of proceed here. Is everybody cool with splitting this up into 2 pieces, the structure and the composition?
Can you clarify when you mean structure, like which calendar we're going to use?
So the structure would be both slide numbers. They're not numbered. I'm so sorry. The slide that has the like the TLE and the business operations finance, like just the different names, like the different categorizations of the committees, in addition to the calendar. So then you had just made I just want to clarify with you because you just made a really good comment about policy. So I want to make sure I'm clear. Are we good with, if we approve that structure, meaning the differently named committees and calendar, are we cool then moving to put that into policy, or do you want that to go to the full board first?
I think it should go to the full board for feedback and then go to policy and personnel. And I'm not committed to how this needs to work, but kind of like we have Skyward and we have the other system running at the same time so we can wean ourselves off. I think it may be a prudent idea to first suspend policy and test it before we rewrite policy and say this is what we're doing. Because if it doesn't work, we can go back to what we're doing. If it does work, then we've polished it out in policy and we confirm everything.
So then to clarify what that would look like. So let's say we're going to go back to the full board meeting and say, here's what we talked about at governance as an action item. We'll talk a little bit about it, and if the will of the board is there, we would approve Dr. Kieser's proposed categories along with one of our calendars, hopefully 3, and then, okay, so that's going to happen. Would we suspend policy like for that next month? Try it out, and then say, and then come back, or what do you when you say?
No, I don't think we would be prepared because we don't have the staff, we don't have the community, we haven't done applications. So I think we're going to be doing what we're doing now for at least the next 2 months. Sure. And then we would suspend policy and then roll it out. And then let's test it over the summer. Seems like summer is kind of a slower time. This works beautifully, and then we'll cement it in policy.
So it would come to policy like July, August-ish?
Yes.
In your imagination. Okay, that makes sense to me. I needed kind of more of a visualization of when you say run at the same time, what that looked like. So thank you for taking the time to clarify that. Are you good, Vice President Wong?
No, I agree with all that.
So it sounds like everybody's cool. So then at this time, do we need a motion then to move the discussion about the committee structure, meaning the different names and the different calendar, to the full board for discussion and approval? Would somebody like to make that motion?
And that was not the language that I put in the board docs, so.
Quick question, Dr. Kieser, would you be making that presentation?
I certainly could make that presentation with the assistance of Board President Miller just to talk more about her vision of the structure in terms of staff and community and board members.
Just to interject, I was actually hoping, could we do could that be a separate item? Actually,
Yes.
That composition piece, that makes it a little clearer.
Yes, I could do I'll clean up my slide deck and I can do the presentation for the full board.
All right, you kind of threw me on that one. I think we're ready to go. So I move that Dr. Kieser and Board President Miller present to the full board the proposed committee renaming, structure, and calendar as discussed.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you for that motion. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I will add in there that I'd be happy to be part of the presentation just from the standpoint of historical data on the previous committee structures and how that worked, and so that people do, I think some of the committee or the board members understand a little bit more about that. I mean, like I said, it's not that it was amazing when I was doing it, but I think having the knowledge base, it was very valuable.
Thank you. That would be really appreciated. All right, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion at this time? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so what I was saying with that second point, in terms of the composition of the committees, like who is on the committee, I feel like as I'm imagining a full board discussion, I think it's wise to separate that out. So as a separate agenda item, is anybody interested in making a motion to move a discussion to the full board about whether to open up our committees to district staff and or community members as voting members? Or are there any questions?
What would be the benefit in separating it out from the presentation?
We could do that. For the motion that you just made could be executed with just board members. You know what I mean? And then, so if the board's behind the change to, like, we're gonna do a teaching learning committee versus like an oversight committee, that isn't stopped. Like, it doesn't stop that from moving forward to change who's on the committee. And I don't know if some board members will have strong opinions one way or the other. Like, I wouldn't want to stop a positive committee structural change based on who's going to be on the committee. That's my reasoning, but I'm open to, obviously, like, open to other thoughts.
So, okay, let's think about this in the logistics of it.
Yes.
So let's say that we now have 3 new committees. It may be 4. This is not going to change right away. Like there's no longer oversight and finance committee meeting. It's now teaching, learning, and equity and pupil services. So I would like to just keep everything packaged together. Because no sudden changes are going to be made right away.
No, that sounds good. Then I just want to clarify with the motion that we just made, are we okay then having a discussion about bringing in staff and or community members, right, within that agenda item?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so as long as that makes sense to you, I guess, yeah, I was thinking about it differently, but yeah, no, hearing you put it that way, and yeah, that makes sense to me too. So if we're good with that, I'm good with that. All right, well, in that case, I think we've covered all of the kind of the extent to which we have to discuss about committees. I guess I know we have like a future agenda items like thing, but since we haven't met as a governance, I've never been on this committee and we haven't met since September. I guess I just want to, we have future meeting dates. Is there an additional, like a topic or a future meeting time that we'd like to set now? Or is it something where you want me to just send out hey, when should we meet next?
I think the hey, when should we meet next may be helpful, but I would, with my question is, what is this committee going to tackle next? Will we have a role in onboarding or kind of the structure of that and how that rolls out? Because to me, that would make sense.
Sure. Vice President Wong, did you have anything before I respond to that?
I'd have to give that a little thought. I mean, I think that we not meeting at all, I don't think is good. I think that there are some things that we can be addressing. There's nothing that's coming fresh to my mind. I would agree with Board Member Levy. I think the onboarding process, which you and I spoke about the other day anyways, I think is critical, just from the standpoint of new board members coming on. And but yeah, I would say, I think there's a lot of stuff that we need to discuss. You brought up the whole idea of agenda items, future agenda items, and my concern is that is that being addressed by all board members? Because I remember we had the calendar, and I felt like I was throwing stuff on there, and it wasn't being addressed. So I guess those are some of the things that I would like to make sure happens going forward.
I love those ideas. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to pull up the calendar really quick. What we were planning on for initially, just initially for onboarding, because I think that's a longer, more drawn out discussion for sure, is I think currently we've got on the 13th, we're going to do a swearing in. And then is it the 27th that's our organizational meeting? So I would propose that we meet early in May, after the organizational meeting, because like we're going to be appointing like mentors, because that's going to be a carryover from like the last year's process, so we're not really making any changes there. I would be interested in meeting sometime maybe the first week of May or so, to talk about, okay, so what are the next steps for onboarding going to be once we've had a chance to meet our new board member or new board members and have tested out kind of mentoring the way that we're going to get it started off. So we'll give it like kind of a couple of weeks, see where we are, and then let's have a meeting for governance to address both the continuation of that onboarding process, and then also maybe, I like what Vice President Wong just brought up about like future agenda items, if there's a better way to do that. Does that sound okay?
No, that sounds perfect. And the other thing that I would love for this committee to start to tackle is meeting efficiency, because I love us, but we are horrible. And it's not fair to us, it's not fair to the community, it's not fair to anyone. And so I have kind of some ideas about how we can tackle that with being realistic with our agenda setting, and then saying, okay, this is an hour meeting or this is an hour and a half meeting, and then sticking to that and knowing when to cut it. Yeah.
I love that idea as well, and I think we could twist Vice President Wong's arm to include that on our agenda as well. So are those?
She stole my thunder.
Is that she did? Is that in your Ms. Shope? Do you have that down, or should I? You want to write an email, or we're good? Okay, you got it. Okay, cool. So do we just want to pick a date and a time right now?
How about the 4th, May 4th? That would be 1 month.
May the 4th be with you. May 4th?
Oh, yes.
That sounds wonderful. Yes,
May the
okay,
4th.
cool. So why don't we do May the 4th?
I walked into that one.
Vice President Wong, what's the best time for you? Because I know you've got a later work schedule, I think.
No, that's planning and budget day. So I'll be here at 5:15.
Oh, right. So why don't we just do the
Follow
same thing
that.
as last time? Okay. So just like 6:30 or
Yeah.
after planning and budget? Works for me.
Make the agenda light.
All right, sounds great. So Ms. Shope, you've got our items for next time. Let me just check back on our agenda here. Okay. Any other board business or any other governance committee business, I should say? We're good? All right. Move to adjourn. Anybody?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Meeting adjourned at 7:29. Thank you very much. This was a fun meeting. Thank you.